It is the 6th century before Christ, and the most powerful empire on earth is not Greek, not Egyptian. It is Median, and it rules from the mountains of Iran. Its king, Astyages, sits on a throne of ivory and gold, master of an empire that stretches from Anatolia to the Hindu Kush. He is a king used to being obeyed, and never once has anyone told him no. But one night, Astyages dreams a dream, and in the dream, a vine grows from his daughter's womb and spreads across the world, casting its shadow over every kingdom he owns. The dream readers gather, and they do not soften the meaning. Her son, they say, will be greater than his grandfather, and his grandfather will fall to him. For Astyages, a prophecy is not a warning. It is a problem, and problems have solutions. He decides the child will never draw breath at all. He calls his most trusted general, a man named Harpagus, and gives him the order. Bring me the child, he says, and do it so cleanly that no one will ever know. Harpagus bows, but his stomach turns. The child he has been told to kill is his own grandnephew. A boy is born, dark-eyed and squalling, and within hours the order is in motion. Harpagus takes the infant into the hills alone, telling the king he has done the deed. But when the moment comes, his hand will not move. Instead, he rides out to the pastures of the royal herdsman, looking for a man he can trust with the most dangerous secret in the empire. The herdsman's name is Mithridates, and he has just buried his own stillborn son. Harpagus presses the royal child into the herdsman's arms, begging him to raise the boy as his own and to tell no one, ever. They place the dead child in a small grave on the hill, and the living child in the dead child's cradle. Back at court, Harpagus brings a bloody cloth to Astyages and says the deed is done. The king sleeps easier that night, believing the prophecy has been strangled in its crib. But out in the pastures, a little boy grows up barefoot, learning to count sheep before he can count to 10. He learns to play the shepherd's pipe, to read the weather, to lead a flock through a storm. In everything he does, the other herders notice something strange. The boy does not behave like a herder's son. When the village children play at being kings, he is the one they choose. He plays the role with unsettling seriousness, dividing land, settling disputes, even pretending to punish a nobleman's son caught stealing. Word of this strange boy reaches the king's ears, and a royal messenger is sent to bring him back to the palace. The moment the king sees the boy, the breath leaves his body, the face, the posture, those are his own daughter's eyes looking back at him. He grips the boy's chin, turns his face to the torchlight, and the resemblance is unmistakable. The prophecy, he realizes, is not dead. It is standing right in front of him, 10 years old and very much alive. He sends for Mithridates, and the herdsman, terrified, confesses everything. The boy is alive because Harpagus lied, and the herdsman says so in front of the whole court. Strangely, the king does not kill the child. A second prophecy from the same dream readers convinces him the danger has already passed. The boy is sent away to live with his true mother in the Persian court, and the herdsman is allowed to slink home in disgrace. But Astyages has not forgotten Harpagus, and a few nights later, he invites the general to dinner. The meal is rich, the wine is heavy, and when Harpagus asks where his son is, the king only smiles. He is shown to a basket on the way out, and inside, wrapped in linen, are the hands and head of his own boy. Harpagus hides the body, swears no oath, but from that night, a quiet fire begins to burn behind his eyes. He finds young Cyrus in secret, kneels before him, and swears a vow he never speaks aloud. Someday, Astyages, someday. And so the boy is sent east, into Persia itself, to grow up among the people his grandfather only barely rules. He finds the Persians poor, hard, and proud, mountain men who love their horses more than their king. Median tax collectors ride through the villages, and Cyrus sees how his kinsmen from the west are hated. He gathers friends around a fire at night, and he begins to speak of freedom. Why? He asks them, do Persians toil so that a foreign king may sit on golden chairs in Ecbatana? His words catch like dry grass, and within a season, every young hunter in the hills is whispering his name. The day the Persians rise, Cyrus leads them west, toward the Median heartland, and Astyages' world begins to crack. Astyages sends his army to crush the revolt, and at its head, he places the general he no longer trusts. When the two armies meet, Harpagus does the only thing a father who has lost his son can do. He throws the battle. The Median lines fold, the Median king falls, and the throne of the Medes passes into the hands of the shepherd's son. Cyrus takes Ecbatana not as a conqueror, but as a son returning to a long-abandoned house, and he spares his grandfather's life. He is, by blood, the grandson of a king, and by training, a man who has had to earn every kindness he shows. He lays down the shepherd's crook and takes up the royal scepter, but the boy from the mountain is still very much there inside him. He takes a wife, Cassandane, daughter of a noble house, and together they will build a court unlike any the world has seen. But the king of Persia cannot rest. East of him, the mountains. West of him, the richest man in the world. That man is Croesus, king of Lydia, and his fortune is so vast that when he asks the oracle whether to march east, the oracle answers. If he crosses the river, he will destroy a great empire. Croesus reads this as a promise, and the next spring, his army crosses the Rallies and marches inland. Cyrus meets him at Thimbra, and the wealthiest army in the world rides straight into a trick no one has tried before. Cyrus puts camels at the front of his line, and the smell of them sends the Lydian cavalry into a panic before a single sword is drawn. The Lydian cavalry breaks, the infantry crumbles, and within a fortnight, the great citadel of Sardis opens its gates. Croesus is brought before Cyrus in chains, the proudest king on earth now a prisoner in his own hall. Cyrus orders him burned alive on a pyre, and the Lydian king, watching the kindling catch, suddenly remembers the words of the Greek sage Solon, that no man should be called happy until he is dead. Cyrus, hearing the story, has the fire put out at the last moment and spares Croesus' life. And from that day, the fallen king becomes one of his closest counselors. With Lydia added to the realm, Cyrus now turns his eyes south toward the rivers of Mesopotamia and toward Babylon. Babylon is the wonder of the world, walls 100 feet high, 100 chariots wide, the Euphrates running right through its heart. The Babylonians laugh at the very idea of siege. No army in the world has ever taken those walls. Their king, Nabonidus, has grown tired of his own people. He has even let the temple of Marduk fall into disrepair, and inside the city, the Jewish exiles are still waiting for someone to take them home. Cyrus does not bring ladders. He brings engineers who dig a great channel upstream and turn the Euphrates aside into a marsh. On the night of a great feast, while the priests of Marduk are drunk in the temple, his army marches up the empty riverbed and slips through the water gates of the inner wall. Babylon falls in a single night, without a battle, and the most powerful city on earth wakes up Persian. Cyrus rides through the Ishtar gate as a liberator, not a conqueror, and the priests of Marduk bless his name. He goes first to the temple of Marduk, restores its rights, and lets every god in the city keep his altar. And then he does something no conqueror before him has ever done. He has a small clay cylinder inscribed with an order to the people of Babylon. The text on that cylinder, the Cyrus Cylinder, is one of the most remarkable documents in human history. It declares that all people are free to worship their own gods, that no one is to be enslaved or displaced, that the king exists to serve his subjects, not the other way around. In the same breath, Cyrus orders the Jewish exiles freed and sent home to Jerusalem with gold from the royal treasury to rebuild their temple. For this reason alone, Cyrus is remembered in the Hebrew Bible as the Lord's anointed, the only Gentile so named. A century before the Buddha, a century before Socrates, this cylinder is in many ways the first human rights charter the world has ever known. The Magna Carta would not be signed for another 17 centuries, and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights for almost 2,500 years. From Anatolia to Afghanistan, from the Caspian to the Persian Gulf, Cyrus builds a single empire, the largest the world has ever seen, and binds it together with one simple rule: leave the people alone. But east of the empire, beyond the Jaxartes River, lives a people who do not bend to this rule. They are the Mithridates, a horse people of the steppe, fierce and free, ruled by a widowed queen whose name alone makes Persians lower their voice. Cyrus is now in his late 50s, and his last campaign will be against her. He marches east, builds a long pontoon bridge across the Jaxartes, and camps on the far side. The Mithridates queen sends a message. Withdraw, she says, and we will live in peace. Cyrus refuses, and the trap closes. He lures the queen's son, Prince Spartopizes, into a tent and has him seized while he eats. The Mithridates army recoils, and the queen, hearing what has been done, swears a terrible oath. She gathers every rider, man and horse, and crashes into the Persian camp with a fury that shakes the earth. The Persian army is slaughtered, the royal camp is overrun, and Cyrus himself is found wounded among the dead. He dies where the shepherds had grazed his cattle when he was a boy, far from home, far from the throne, and 83 battles into the life he had built against every odd. The Mithridates queen, true to her oath, fills a wineskin with human blood and dips the head of the dead king into it. So ends the life of the first conqueror in history to free the people he defeated. His body is carried home and laid in a small stone tomb at Pasargadae. And the tomb he chose for himself is almost identical in size to the hut of the herdsman who raised him. On the stone is carved a single line: "O man, whoever you are and wherever you come from, I am Cyrus." 2 centuries later, a young Macedonian conqueror stops his army at Pasargadae to lay a wreath on the tomb, and weeps, Alexander the Great, looking at the simple stone of the man who had done what he could only dream of. After him, his son Cambyses adds Egypt, his cousin Darius builds the road system and the postal service, and the empire endures for 200 years after his death. The royal road he inspired, 2,700 kilometers from Susa to Sardis, will carry messages and merchants for centuries. The thing that outlasts him is not the army, not the gold, not even the walls of Babylon. It is the simple, almost stubborn idea that a king is only as good as the piece he leaves behind him. And that idea, planted in clay 25 centuries ago, still grows. When the United Nations was founded, a replica of the Cyrus Cylinder was placed at its entrance as a quiet reminder of where the idea began. Alexander burned Persepolis. Genghis Khan broke Baghdad. Every other conqueror left ruin in his name. Cyrus the Great is the only one whose empire was larger at his death than at his birth, and the only one whose subjects wept when he fell. Xenophon, the Athenian soldier who fought in the empire's last wars, would later write a whole book about him, the Cyropaedia, and call him the greatest of all kings. His tomb at Pasargadae still stands, with a small olive tree growing beside it, planted by a Jewish delegation in 1971 to honor the man who had freed their ancestors 2,500 years before. Think of that, for a moment, a life that started in a basket in a herdsman's hut and ended as the charter of the modern world. From the basket to the throne, from a condemned infant to the man whose name is still whispered in synagogues, in parliaments, in the marble halls of the United Nations. Harpagus saved him, Mithridates raised him, and Persia chose him. And in the end, that is what made him different from every other conqueror in history. He did not conquer an empire by the sword alone. He conquered it by leaving the people their gods, their languages, their names, and their lives. And 2,500 years later, every constitution on earth still owes a small debt to a clay cylinder found in the ruins of Babylon. That is the life of Cyrus the Great, a condemned baby who became a shepherd's son who became a king, and a king who taught the world that conquest could be, for once, an act of mercy. So if you ever wonder what could have happened if a cruel grandfather's order had been carried out, that empty basket in a museum in Iran is the answer to the question. He lived, and because he lived, the rest of us got to live a little more freely in a world that was, against all odds, a touch more merciful than the one he was born into.